And joining us now is Daniel Levy of both the European Council on Foreign Relations and the New America Foundation. Daniel, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Michael. How are you?
Oh, great. Okay, that sounds great. It's great to have you. So what I wanted to open up with is we just are hearing news out of Egypt that the former president who was deposed, President Mubarak in 2011, through this kind of confluence of the protests in Tahrir Square and also the military, in fact, it looks as if he's going to be released from custody and charges are going to be dropped against him. And I think at this point, I mean, would you say that this is the kind of symbolic completion of what this is, which is like a counter-revolution, in fact?
I think that's a very accurate way of portraying it, that really it shows, number one, who's really in charge. This is the deep state. It is the same folks. It shows the degree of confidence they have right now that they can take a step like this. I think it shows a couple of other things as well. One is that the judiciary, who some have liked to suggest are some kind of a balanced middle check and balance force in this whole thing, including the president now, nominally president in this new setup, coming from the judiciary. It shows that they are part of that old deep state. They disbanded parliament. They went against the elected president, and we see clearly who most of the judiciary are beholden to. And finally, I think it's part of a conscious effort to provoke. I think that the new military leadership are inviting, are pushing, are provoking for there to be some kind of a violent backlash, because that legitimizes their narrative that this is somehow a part of an anti-terror effort, and it legitimizes their crackdown.
Right, that makes perfect sense. And to sort of add to that, does this actually sort of put, it was very controversial a year ago when President Morsi was attempting to push through some really aggressive reforms to things like the judiciary. And a lot of people reacted very negatively to what he was pushing. Does what's happening with the judiciary now not necessarily justify what he was doing, but kind of put a different light on it?
Look, I think there was an understanding that there was an awful lot that would have to be changed, that would have to be built almost from afresh if Egypt was going to, in the terminology that we tend to use, was going to have a successful democratic transition, and that there was an appreciation that much of this would take time. Some of it perhaps had to be moved on sooner rather than later. And I think there are maybe two takeaways from what we've seen so far. First of all, that the Brotherhood was probably not ambitious enough in what it tried to do while it was in power in terms of undermining the mechanisms of the old regime. But number two, how difficult that would have been. And I think it would be fair to say also how difficult to the point of impossible it was if you didn't have a broader coalition than just the Brotherhood doing this. And I think that is one of the criticisms leveled against President Morsi. But I think what we see from this is there was a deep state that it would take years and years to get the better of. And there's an interesting analogy to be made here with Turkey, is that just how long it has taken to really undermine the role that the military, for instance, plays in life in Turkey, even up to and including this latest trial. And the part of that analogy is that the secular liberal forces, also in Turkey when they were in power, remained somewhat circumspect to go after the deep state in a full-on way, because they saw the deep state as the bulwark against the Islamists. And in Egypt, of course, we're way earlier in the process. But it does seem that, again, the so-called liberal secular forces ultimately prefer limited, they would have thought limited democracy. We're seeing no democracy at all, probably. It's a military junta now, to the possibility of Islamist rule. Whether it could have worked out better and whether you could have had a stronger alliance between Islamist Democrats and non-Islamist Democrats, we can't know in terms of the last 2 years. The question is, will we ever find out in the future?
Right. And actually, Daniel Levy, could you, for our audience, define what the deep state is? Because I think that's a really important term to kind of understand when we're talking about a place like Egypt.
Well, I mean, look, every country has the bits of its political system, the bits of the way it is ruled that are transparent and open, and the bits that are less so. I guess one could look at the American system and look at some of how some lobbying influences work in Congress and say America has an element of this.
Or aspects of the national security bureaucracy or something like that.
Didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm saying something like the national security bureaucracy or something like that as well.
Exactly, but also the role that big finance or big pharma plays in the system. But in a place like Egypt, which is so much further down in terms of being behind on the democratic road, you have a system where there is a deep role of the military, backed up by a judiciary that was appointed and sees itself beholden in a certain way, a state bureaucracy, especially the state security bureaucracy, the intel, the interior ministry, all of which adds up, including the role that the military plays in the economy. All of which adds up to a very powerful complex. Nathan Brown, who's a scholar at Carnegie, has written about not just the deep state, but the broad state, and that we've seen the broad state in place. There are different ways of looking at this, but that's the basic concept.
So getting back to the analogy you drew with Turkey, which I think is a very interesting one, because it seems like one aspect in a historical context of what's going on is that some of the kind of roots of modern terrorist movements like Al-Qaeda are rooted in a kind of initial crackdown in Egypt against the Muslim Brotherhood that began decades ago. So there's kind of that wave of repression and abuse connected with some of the threats we face in the modern context. In Turkey, even though some people might see Erdogan and his kind of cracking down on protesters in public parks in Istanbul and things like that, he's far from a perfect leader. But he was the product of an Islamic politics in Turkey that actually kind of renewed its commitment to democratic process in the face of the deep state in Turkey, in fact. So I'm wondering, do you think that where does the Muslim Brotherhood kind of go from here in the face of this? Is there a possibility of a continued, renewed commitment to some type of democratic process, or do you think there's a retraction from the process for pretty obvious reasons?
Yeah, and I think this is obviously one of the things that the military regime, the new military regime in Egypt now plays on and tries to use in its favor, which is that it can use this anti-terror storyline both domestically and internationally. Now, we're almost, as you suggested, seeing a replay of General Nasser against the original, some of the second generation Brotherhood leadership, Said Qutb from the 50s. The Muslim Brotherhood has gone through a number of iterations since then to get to the place where we were at in the latter Mubarak years, when they participated in parliamentary elections, even though the extent of their representation was circumscribed. and right through to deciding they would run and even run for the presidency, which they said they weren't going to do initially. Once Egypt was seen to have enough of a fair system that they'd be given a fair crack at it, so to speak. So the Brotherhood, including this generation of Brotherhood leaders, the people who are now back under arrest, many of these people have known crackdowns in the past, have known lengthy spells in prison in the past. Their contemporaries, many of them would not be alive today as a result of previous crackdowns. So they know just how risk-laden going back to a path of being an underground movement, being a movement that engages in armed resistance is. They know how much of a price as a movement and as individuals they are liable to pay for this. And it took a long time to get to the place that they got to in terms of standing up to the more hardline Salafist Islamist elements, in the fight over whether to embrace democracy or not, in the fight over whether to embrace elections or not. The Al-Qaedaists and other groups, of course, said democracy, Western import, anti-Islamist, kufr, not something that can be justified in Quranic terms. And right now, of course, what you're seeing is that schism, that division is playing out in a way in which those who, I think, went some distance in internalizing a degree of democracy, they are being terribly weakened. Those who say you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have gone there in the first place, those who have a different interpretation of Islamist doctrine, how that doctrine interacts with contemporary society and contemporary politics, and certainly who would embrace a more violent path, they are being strengthened. I don't think the Brotherhood themselves are about to go down that path, but other Islamist groups, both formal organized groups and individuals and people doing copycat Al-Qaedaism, let's say, will feel emboldened, and they will increasingly have a wider pool of very disenchanted, disaffected, and very, very angry people to appeal to and to draw on.
And that will play, it seems, right into the military strategy of kind of turning, that just making this a war on terror frame. And I think that brings us to how events are being perceived in Western countries. And I think, there was certainly sympathy when people were out on the streets protesting Morsi, and a lot of kind of general observers here perceived it as, maybe people out kind of pushing to preserve the original goals of the Tahrir uprising. But now as this turns into more overtly what it, certainly was to a great extent from the beginning, which really is a military coup, and we look at where we might have leverage points to influence events on the ground. And I'm just wondering do you think that part of the problem from a Western perspective is just a continued inability to see that Islam and democracy can be compatible, and that's allowing us to, in some respects, be ambivalent about something that maybe if it was happening in like Chile or something would be much more obvious to us?
I think you're absolutely right. It is a very difficult conceptual leap for many people to make. Number one, we of course have our own prejudices. Mm-hmm. We still also live in the shadow of 9/11. We certainly live in the shadow of an awful lot of Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism that exists often in our societies. There is also, of course, the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood are not going to be a liberal's cup of tea in any sense of the term.
They're Republicans.
We don't. Whether it comes to women's rights, gay rights, all kinds of progressive issues that I think would raise questions as to just how democratic they can be. I think in the context of contemporary Egypt, the argument would be you make the best of what you've got, and if it's murderous military dictators versus these guys getting mowed down on the streets, I think to my mind it's quite clear where one's sympathies would lie. But nevertheless, I can understand why that's a difficult thing for people to get their heads around. And then it takes you into this territory where it's easier for people to depict them in kind of scary and unsympathetic terms. When, for instance, we'll hear people saying, look, they're the ones who went out on the streets. They wanted martyrdom. They were ready for martyrdom. It's a totally different mindset. And I find that really unacceptable, actually, because in most instances, when people put themselves on the line for a cause, and in this case, the cause, let's face it, is a democratically elected president being deposed by a coup. In most circumstances, as you say, Chile or anywhere else would say that is a worthy, noble cause, and if people are willing to pay the ultimate price, we normally see that as something very noble. And I don't think we should apply a totally different set of rules because of the nature of the people who are willing to make that sacrifice. These people don't want to get killed. We saw yesterday that they redirected marches in order to try and avoid bloodshed.
That makes perfect sense. One final question, Daniel Levy. Do you think it's time for the United States, for European countries to pull aid from Egypt, or do you think that would just kind of push Egypt closer to countries like Saudi Arabia and other sort of conservative forces in the Middle East that are backing the coup right now?
Look, first of all, some European countries have suspended their aid already. Some are suspending arms sales. European foreign ministers are meeting on Wednesday to discuss what steps to take. The president has obviously announced the suspension or the cancellation of joint military exercises, which is really the lowest thing on the scale of a response that one can get to. The military assistance continues. I think that more does have to be done in terms of a response that demonstrates that we are serious in this not being okay, and that whether or not this is going to change things in Egypt, and I don't think we have decisive leverage. I don't think we have decisive influence, but we should at least be sending the right signals. We should be calibrating those signals correctly on a scale, and just cancelling military exercises is not enough in the face of what's happened. And we should also be doing the right thing and sending the signal elsewhere. Does that push Egypt into other people's arms? That had happened anyway. The day of the military coup, you had the Saudis, the United Arab Emirates, and others lining up to welcome the change and to offer far more in assistance than the United States and Europe put together can or will offer. Will it push Egypt into an anti-Western camp? I would say the following: if this is the price of them being on our side, I don't think it's a price to pay. Plus, I don't think you're really going to buy them as an ally. I think just as has happened in the past, the moment the military coup leaders see it in their interests to turn against the West and to rally popular sympathy against the West as part of their own narrative for their own legitimacy, they will do it whether we go soft on them today or whether we go hard on them today. So better to show them that we have a bit of backbone and that we're willing to do the right thing. And the other reason to do that is that there is a political class and a business class in Egypt that is more Western-oriented and that has been backing this coup and even encouraging it, and they should know that it's not going to be business as usual. It's not going to be normal relations if they are not a pressure group on the military to back down. So we don't have decisive leverage, but we should be doing the right thing.
That makes perfect sense. And also, as we've joked about around here a little bit cynically, when Obama canceled the bilateral military exercises, the Egyptian military said that's okay. Our hands are actually pretty full at the moment. So, so I think
no, that's right. They're playing a game of brinksmanship at the moment with us, which is the other reason we should be doing more. They're saying, you know what, we don't need your help. And to be honest, if that's the case, then I think America has better places to spend its money. Europe has better places to spend its money. And we shouldn't flinch.
No, that makes perfect sense. Daniel Levy of the European Council on Foreign Relations and the New America Foundation, as well as a man with a strong inner rabbi, as we were talking about before the interview. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Okay, take care.